All right.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Okay, you can see. So
Okay.
the sound. I need to figure out the sound here. Yeah, just a second, Alishba.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, you can. There's some loudspeakers here.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, you can speak now.
Okay. So hi guys. Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce myself so you guys know who I am a little bit better. So I'm Alishba, and as she said, I'm from Toronto, and I'm actually 15 years old, and I'm really passionate about emerging technology. So I've actually been doing a lot of work with different technologies. So some technologies being like virtual reality, augmented reality, blockchain. So I've done a bit of work in blockchain, and now I'm moving on to like artificial intelligence. So I've built a bunch of different projects in those spaces. So for virtual reality, I've built some different games, and I've built my own like sports training application. For blockchain, I'm currently working on developing an application that's able to track counterfeit medicine within a supply chain. So I'm going to be giving a presentation about that today as well, and just a little bit more about that and showing you guys some code and how I kind of developed the application. And then I'm currently experimenting with AI, as I said. So I've used something called convolutional neural networks and artificial intelligence to basically be able to detect pneumonia within x-rays, images of different chests. So just been playing around with different stuff, and I've just always been really passionate about emerging technologies and like how we can apply that to different issues. So that's one of my goals, is learn about different technologies and then see how I can solve some of the important issues that are happening within our world right now. So yeah, are there any questions so far? Okay, cool. So yeah, I think like it's really cool that you guys are here at CryptoChicks. It's a great way to get started and get involved in the space and just learn a little bit more about technology. And as you guys are kind of developing your own pitches, I would say my number one tip would just be to build something that people always want. So build something that people want. When you're actually developing something or pitching an idea, make it something that is important, is an issue, and something that people would actually want. Because a lot of times, a lot of companies are building products and, there's not a lot of demand for it because it's not an important issue. It's not something that needs to be hugely addressed. So I'd say like really be mindful about that and intentional about that, and then build something off of that. So yeah, I'm going to start with my presentation. Just share the screen. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes. Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about my counterfeit medicine application in blockchain. So how I actually got involved in this was a few years ago. I was visiting my family back in India, and it was actually really interesting because I heard a story that really stuck with me. My uncle was telling me a story about how his neighbor, his child was basically diagnosed with a fatal disease. And their family was really worried, thinking that there was no sort of treatment that they could really get to help him. Until they went to the top-notch doctor that they could really afford in the area, and they were prescribed some medicine. So they go out, they buy this medicine, but fast forward to 2 weeks later, they find out that the medicine they bought was actually not authentic and was fraud. So this medicine just ended up making him even more sick. And this just made me think, because a lot of times when we look at these kinds of issues, we think that they're far away from us, or they might not be happening as often, as we may think, and maybe just more often in developing countries. But it's also a huge reality in countries like Switzerland or Canada or US, which is crazy to think about. So I decided to look into it and, look into more research, because I was really inspired by this issue and what we can really do about it. So statistics have actually shown that 10% of all of the medicine that's out there in our world right now is actually counterfeit. So let's think of it as like every 100 medicine that's out there, 10 of it is probably not going to be authentic or is not going to be helpful. And then, you know, if you look into certain areas like Asia or Latin America and Africa, these percentages can even go to like 30 and 40%, which is so crazy. That's almost like a half percentage. Like, just imagine going to the store and, you know, buying medicine for yourself and then thinking that you have a half and half chance of this medicine actually helping you or making your condition even worse. So it's so crazy to think about. And there's also around 1.5 million deaths that are happening every single year, and it's just a growing industry that's actually predicted to grow at like twice the rate of actual legitimate medicine at one point. So I think that it's just absolutely ridiculous that, you know, in developing countries, this is still such a huge issue. And it's something that I was really determined to solve and see how we can use different technologies to just combat it, because it's not something that's really difficult to do, but we just have a lot of different constraints, and our current system is just really horrible. So the reason why this is actually a huge issue and the driving factor is actually our current pharmaceutical research and development. It's super, super complex. So, you know, you have your drug discovery, drug development, and then you have to get approval before it goes out into the market. But that's just a very simplified version of it. There's actually so much that goes into the process, and it's so easy for a lot of different companies to create loopholes. So sometimes what companies will do is they'll either like replicate a product of another company and sell it as being legitimate, or a huge industry right now is just selling these kinds of medicines online. And so that's how, you know, a lot of people in countries like Canada, US, oftentimes get into these loopholes as well, is because they're selling these products online being legitimate, but they're not actually you know, legit. So that's a huge issue right now, as well as sometimes companies aren't getting the proper approval, or they're collecting data, but their data set is too small that when it comes out, it has opposite effects or is not as effective. There's different factors that, you know, you might be wondering, like, why are people doing this? Why are people getting involved in this industry? Why are people, you know, selling fake medicine? What does that do for them, other than harm people? Well, it's actually a huge market. So it's actually a $30 billion market, and it's a lot of people are making a lot of profit off of this industry, and it's very difficult for people to actually get caught because there's not a lot of focus on this issue. So, you know, especially in a lot of small towns, companies are taking advantage of that. It's just a huge market size and a lot of high profitability at minimum risk. So less consequences right now in place for them, as well as just a lot of institutional factors, like we just have a weak legal system in place right now. So, you know, in countries like Canada and the US, it's a lot of times like almost 80% of our medicine contains something from outside regions. So it's really difficult for us to control that across borders and coming in and out of different countries. So, you know, that's how we can also end up with this kind of medicine. If you just go to, you know, any type of store. And then you have technology. We just don't have enough technologies that are really helping to combat this issue, or even track the medicines so that we can actually see what's happening with our medicines. You know, current system is that we have production of the medicine and it's in store. As a consumer, you really don't know where it's coming from and, you know, what the cycle is before you buy it, before it reaches you. And so even as consumers, I bet a lot of us in this room didn't even know that this was a huge issue until now. So, you know, there's just low awareness towards this issue, but as well, like when we're going to the store, you know, we're not really thinking too much about the medicine or looking at it or, you know, studying it in a really, really high intensity. It's just that we're just going and buying the product. And oftentimes that's how we can end up with, you know, this kind of medicine. And, you know, if you're just buying it from a bunch of random stores. So I looked at all of this and they're all huge issues. But what really stood out to me was technology. I actually think that technology has the potential to destroy all of these and actually help, you know, kind of combat all of this and all of these different issues by using the power of technology. So I started to look more into that, and I actually found an application where we can actually use blockchain in order to combat this issue, which is actually a super simple concept because it's already been done before. So you're just kind of taking the blockchain and you're applying it into the supply chain. So theoretically, how it would work is you would have some sort of ID or QR code attached to your medicine, and this would be attached to a virtual hash online. And as it moves along in the supply chain, it would be tracked, and people would be checking for authenticity. And then each time that product has reached to the consumer, it would be recycled. So it's just adding more transparency and actually tracking that process from when the medicine is with the distributor to actually reaching you. So before we can go too much into how this actually works, we need to understand what type of technology we're using. You know, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with blockchain, but there's a lot of different words that are kind of thrown around in the space. So we have distributed ledger technologies, which I've kind of grouped these into 3 categories for myself. So we have distributed ledger technologies, which is kind of like the hierarchy. It's the overall technology. And then an application of that is big blockchain. And so blockchain is the application. A lot of times people say that's a technology, but I would almost argue that it's just distributed ledger technology. And there's different types. Blockchain is just an example. And the application of blockchain is Bitcoin. So we're going to be focusing on distributed ledger technologies and using their capabilities to help us. There's a few core concepts that go into this. So the first thing we have is the type of ledger. So for my case, I actually ended up using Fabric Hyperleger, which is a really good just architecture for using this because it's really versatile. So it can actually be applied to different settings, and it's actually really effective for using it in a supply chain. As well as what's essential is the capability for data to actually be stored in sequential blocks, because the entire point is that we're able to track and create full transparency of the product. So with the blocks, we're able to keep track of different things and be able to really see that play out as new data is being added. And then you have cryptographic keys, which is probably actually just a huge component of this, because without this, we wouldn't have patients putting in all of their information and data and trusting us. And then we have tamper evidence. The reason why this is so good is that you can easily tell when any sort of tampering has been done, or you know, if any drug packaging has happened, or even in the virtual space, if anything has been played around with. So this space is really exciting because we went from a central to a distributed ledger technology. So central was, you know, when we just had one authority keeping in charge of all of the information, which you can think it's a bad thing because there's a lot of high vulnerability. It's really easy for someone to attack the network and get all of the information. Now we've went into a distributed type of technology, which just means that everyone is sort of equal in a sense. So the data is kind of distributed amongst different people, which just makes it really more transparent and, you know, more difficult to actually hack into the system. Essentially, these are just the basics, but I want to go over them to make sure we're all on the same page. But basically, nodes, the way I like to think of it, are just a bunch of different people in a network. So you're basically sharing all of this information with different people in the network. And something that we've added onto this, and something that's a huge component of Fabric Hyperleger, is consensus. So what that means is everyone within that network and everyone who's kind of involved in that, all the different nodes, if new sets of data is being added, there would be a consensus, and you are allowed to say yes or no to the data being added. And again, that just makes sure that the information being added is real and authentic. And then you have the component of blocks. So blocks are basically the way that we would be tracking and inputting different data. So each block has its own index, and then it also has a timestamp of when it's added. And then you also have a hash. So each one has its own unique hash. So this would be, you know, each unique product in the system, and then it would also record the previous hash. So as I said, this is via cryptography. So this is a pretty complex concept, but basically what it is that each person has their own public and private key. And so you're using the receiver as a sender, you're using the receiver's public key to send over the product. And then as a receiver, you're using your private key to accept it. And then you can basically check the information to make sure that it's authentic, and you can sign off on the product. And what makes this really good is that it's immutable, so you can't actually be reversed. So this can only be sent over one time. So the way that this would work in our case is that you would have the manufacturer who would use a unique code to basically mark the product, and then he would have a hash created in the blockchain. All this information would be stored onto the Hyperleger Fabric system, and then you would send the drug off to the wholesaler, and then that person would verify the drug's origin. And then the wholesaler would send it off to the pharmacist, who would again verify it, and then it's sent to the patient, who would then again verify, where their product is coming from and the origin of the product. So you can imagine, this process would run pretty smoothly. So it'd be really difficult to catch any sort of, drug repackaging or any sort of second wholesaler that comes into the supply chain. So this just makes sure that, we're being more educated, but at the same time, we just understand like where our products are genuinely coming from. So it's just creating more transparency and more awareness about, what we're consuming and what our products are. So the concept I've explained so far is pretty simple. We've already seen applications of it. It's just using, blockchain and Hyperleger Fabric and attaching it to a supply chain. But the way that we can really uplift this and make this a super exciting product is by using HL7. So in simple words, HL7 is just, it's just a sharing of different amount of data. So a huge issue in our current healthcare system is interoperability, as well as just the sharing of data in a really secure way. We have all of these different institutions and hospitals. They have their own data and research, but none of it is being shared to other people on a platform that's really secure, right? And that's something that is a huge issue, and there's different applications of that. But the way that we can do this is just kind of adding it onto the supply chain of counterfeit medicine. So, when you'd usually go to the hospital, you would have to fill out a bunch of forms, about your own information, insurance, whatever it may be. Now, all of this information would just be secured onto the blockchain. So I decided to play around with this and add some code. So this is what some sample code could look like for HL7. As you can see over here, it's just standard data like your MRN, your name, your gender, your birth date, and who your provider is. So, you would have this information secured on here. Let's say you go to the doctor. As you're getting checkups, it would be updated on here as you're the patient. And then let's say your doctor prescribes you some medicine. That would be sent over to you. You would use that to basically put in an order, and then you would be able to track that, using the same application and what I basically described with the supply chain until the product reaches you. And so all of the system, all of the data would be stored on there, like when the doctor is asking you to buy different amounts of drugs, so that you can really see everything in a more transparent and manageable way. This industry is super exciting. There's actually a few companies that have already started to work on this. I think Hyperleger is one of the first ones that started, but it's also really exciting because we have recent work with companies like Oracle that are using their cloud service and are actually partnering up with companies in India to actually be able to solve their issue, because their issue is super huge and it's continuing to grow every single day. So they've actually used a simple application of just using Hyperleger Fabric in the supply chain to tackle this issue. So this is super exciting. Their partnership happened back 28th of September of last year. So it's really exciting to see how this could roll out and potentially make this a more scalable idea. Yeah, this is a huge issue, and I'm just so passionate about it. I think that it's an issue that has been ignored for so long, and it's a growing one because, you know, it's predicted to grow at twice the rate at one point of legitimate medicine, which is crazy to think about. And even though we might think that this issue is, you know, far away from us, only in developing countries, it's also happening in our countries and is hidden away. You know, there's so many deaths happening every single year because of this issue. And, you know, no matter if you're, you know, my uncle's neighbor or whoever you are, nobody deserves to, you know, first of all, not receive the proper health care. But, you know, if you do receive that, you know, not receive the proper supplies or medicine that you need to really recover or live a healthy life. So yeah, this is something that I'm really passionate about and I'm really working on right now. So I have a few images. I'm gonna show you guys a few images of the project. I can't really do a demo right now. I would, but it's still like, the project is still in the works. It's not like 100% done, so it's like difficult for me to show that, but I do have a few screenshots of some stuff that I've done with it. So yeah. Are there any questions, by the way, about the product or how it works?
I have a question. Is the HL7, is it some Hyperleger language? Is it some standard language?
So it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just like its own sort of technology. It just allows for basically the sharing of data. So it's just a sharing, like it's just a system where people share data.
I also have a question. I don't know if, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wonder, a QR code, I think that adds a certain level of a threshold, but can I not copy paste the QR code and put that on a fake drug?
Yeah, so so the thing with that is that, so I'm still trying to figure out how that exactly would work, but I think that what a lot of the applications right now is that they have like some sort of unique QR codes. So once you have a QR code on a product, it would be registered with that specific ID. So if someone does replicate a QR code, the system would already know that that has been used. So that product has to be, you know, not authentic, because each one would be a unique QR code, if that makes sense.
Can I just, like, it's a physical image, I suppose, but how can you make a physical image unique?
It's unique. Each QR code has its own ID.
Yeah, but I can make copy on a copy machine. Can I not go to a copy machine, copy it, and glue it on another product?
Yeah, so so the whole point is that it would be, that QR code would be registered to a specific like hash. So we would know, or an ID. So we would know that that belongs to that. So if it is replicated and registered in the system, we would know that that QR code is just being used again. So we would know that product is not in the system. Yeah. Okay. So I have, again. Okay. Can you guys see that? Is it good? Yeah. Okay. So this is some of the code that I've done so far. So these are just screenshots. So the way that this works is that this is just a bunch of different data of different patients. This is just some sample information that I put in. So this example would secure information like who the manufacturer is. Each product would have an ID as well as a timestamp, and then you need to know who the holder is. So who the current, you know, who is currently holding the product within the supply chain. So that could be, you know, the actual manufacturer, or that could be the just the doctor's office, or wherever. And then you also have the drug's location, so exactly where the drug is located. Okay, and so each time you're adding a new product, a new transaction ID is added. So and then you add the name of the holder, and this is also then added onto, you know, all of this different information and data. So currently just playing around with this and seeing how we can use this to be able to, you know, integrate HL7 and be able to just do more sharing of data as well. But this is a sample of what it could look like, possibly. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it for all that I want to talk about. If you do guys have any questions about, you know, your specific projects or what you're thinking about, or any sort of questions or any tips or advice that you would ask, I would love to answer those.
Mm-hmm. Alishba, if you would be available to do like the private, tutoring with whoever wanted to take your advice, would you be available like later in the day today?
Like, yeah, so
yeah, in the next couple of hours, yes.
Yeah, it's like 7 a.m. here right now, so I probably will be.
Yeah, thank you for waking up that early.
I know, I never wake up this early.
Not on Saturday, right?
Yeah, it's Saturday. It's okay.
Thank you very much, Alishba. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask now, or if you need Alishba help, she's really experienced in that. So we can connect you privately. You can talk to her and maybe get her advice, the code, whatever help you can get.
Yeah, I can share my email, LinkedIn, all of that fun stuff. So if you guys want to like contact me and stay in touch, I would love to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alishba. And yeah, so we will be in touch. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Bye.